Morning, and thank you very much. I promise you this is going to be a great 3 days, maybe the most profound 3 days of your life. I started off my life quite humbly. I did not graduate from high school, and I worked at laboring jobs for several years. And when I could no longer find a laboring job, like many of you, I got into sales. And I struggled in sales for a long time, and then I began asking the question, why is it that some people are more successful than others? Later, I studied and I found that very often a key question will hit you at a particularly vulnerable time in your life, and your whole life will go off in a different direction. And my life went off in a different direction from that question. I began to ask, why is it that some people are more successful than others? Why is it that some people accomplish vastly more? They make far more money, they are more successful in their careers, they have better relationships, great families, fabulous health, they live a long time, they go on cruise ships and beautiful restaurants, and the great majority of people, as Emerson said, live lives of quiet desperation. I think quiet desperation means that they feel that they could be doing far better than they are. And the worst of all is when we look around and we see people who are doing better than we are, and we compare ourselves with them, it makes us both angry, it makes us frustrated. And here's the great discovery. I thought at the beginning that people who were more successful came from better families and had more money and went to top colleges and were more intelligent and more creative and had better personalities and were more attractive. I thought all those things were the reasons why people were more successful. And then when I was about 28, I came across some research from Harvard that said none of them are true. There's people who came from terrible families who are billionaires, people who came from billionaire families who are impoverished and driving taxi cabs. There's people with high IQs who are struggling. There's people with average IQs who are running large businesses. And so there was no correlation. We found there's only one correlation for success, and it has to do with the way you think, is that if you think differently, your whole life transforms. And I wanted to tell you just a quick story. Anyway, so years passed, and I began to learn these principles and to practice these principles, and my life gradually got better and better. And then I became a really intensive student of what I'm going to teach you today, tomorrow, and Sunday. And as I began to use these principles, it was like stepping on the accelerator of a car or pushing down on a dynamite detonator. Wham! Things changed so profoundly for me and for everybody who began to use these principles. Well, anyway, I got to the point where I had a goal, and we'll talk about this later. I had a goal. It was a fantasy. I was driving a used car, and I saw a guy who was younger than me who turned out to be not as smart as me. And there's nothing will make you madder than to see somebody who's dumber than you who's making more money than you. And this guy was driving a brand new, beautiful 450 SEL silver gray Mercedes-Benz. One of those big, beautiful luxury limousines. And I saw this guy driving this car, and I was so envious of the car. I said, that's the car I would love to have. I would love to have a car like that. And whenever I saw cars, by now, whenever you think of that, you trigger what is called your reticular cortex, which is a part of your brain that makes you alert to cars. So then you start to see Mercedes-Benzes everywhere. Everywhere you go, you start to see them. And time passed, I was working hard, I was doing something else, and I was calling on the general manager. His name was Mike Malone, I still remember, of a combined Mercedes-Volvo dealership. And we're talking about something else. He said, Brian, he said, I've got exactly the right car for you. And I said, no, not in a place like this. He said, come here. He took me, he was on the second floor. He said, there's the car for you. It was a 450 SEL silver gray Mercedes-Benz with blue leather upholstery. It was my dream car. And of course, like most people, I said, no, I can't afford that. It costs too much. And I said, well, don't be too sure. You have your own business, don't you? I said, yes. Well, under our laws, you can buy it through your business, and you can not only deduct depreciation, but you can also deduct 100% of the costs and the interest costs and all the fuel costs. So, and I said, but I couldn't afford the. He said, we'll take your car as a down payment, so you'll have no down payment. He said, let's work out what it would cost. It worked out, after everything, it would cost me $120 a month to drive that car. So I drove it home. And Barbara said, oh my God, what have you done? Anyway, so I'm driving this car. I'm very happy with this car. So even the boss for the company I worked at was a little bit coming, am I paying you so much you can drive a car like that? I mean, I had the biggest and best car in the whole company. And it was a large company. And so I was happy, and I would take it out, and we'd get on the highway, and I'd put on the gas, and it would be like a big land boat. And it would go, and it'd pick up speed, and it would just shoot down the highway 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and so on. And so I was very happy with driving this car, and then I had to have a service, so I took it in to get it serviced. I went to pick it up. I still remember the mechanic's name was Mario, and he had been trained by Mercedes-Benz. He was an excellent mechanical engineer. And he said, I found a major problem with your carburetor. He said one of the previous service people had put in the valve, the acceleration valve, backwards. So instead of it spraying open, it was spraying down. I said, well, I've never noticed any difficulties. I mean, it runs fine. He said, well, I think you'll notice the difference. He said, but you've got to be very light on the pedal. I said, oh, okay. So I got in the car. And I was used to stepping on the gas, and the car started to, pick up speed and start moving, slowly. So I still remember, I got into the parking lot. I started up. I stepped on the gas, and the car went like that, and shot across the lot and into the street where the traffic was. I had to slam on the brakes to stop the car from going straight into the oncoming traffic. And I had to back it up. I said, what on earth happened? He said, well, the valve was in backwards. And so from then on, here I was driving this car. I thought it was doing real well. I was quite happy with it. I was more than happy with it. But with one change of one valve, was able to turn that into almost like a racing car. I got 3 speeding tickets in the next 30 days. I mean, because I would just just touch that gas pedal, and the car would go blam, like a car in a road race. And the lesson that I learned from that was very interesting. It was that within each of us, there's a control valve like that. Sometimes several. Sometimes you have to go through, just like a mechanic, and go through all of the valves. But what happens is if you can find that control valve and you can reverse it, change it, correct it, and the control valve is mental and emotional and psychological, you can suddenly explode in terms of your potential, and what you can do and what you can accomplish and how you feel about yourself. All of these wonderful things can happen for you. And almost every one of us has a block there. This, again, I spent 4,000 hours studying this very subject of blocks. From Sigmund Freud, from 1895 all the way through to today, the very best psychologists say that within each person there's enormous potential. However, there are blocks that we have, and they're almost always psychological blocks. They're not blocks on the outside, they're blocks on the inside. So what we'll do today is we'll start talking about how you can release more of your potential than you ever dreamed possible. Now, I will give you the tools that work. I've given this program to more than 1 million people in 38 countries and 27 languages. On video, I've trained live presenters, and the feedback in every culture, every language, every nation is the same. I have 300 centers in China that give this program in Chinese. Because the Chinese are very, very aggressive about learning and growing and eating our lunch, if they possibly can. So, I'd like to show you and talk to you about some basic ideas. Here we go. Truth number 1 is that you're a thoroughly good person in every way. It's interesting how simple this is as a statement, but it's amazing how many people are really not convinced of that. They're not convinced that they're a thoroughly good person. We'll talk about the reasons for this. They question themselves, they question their goodness, they question their honesty, they question the depth of their character. But the fact is that you are a thoroughly good person. You're a completely good person, almost like a diamond in every way. And when you accept that as a truth, your whole life and your attitude toward life changes completely. The second thing we know is that you have more potential than you could use in 100 lifetimes. And this is a major subject, was a major reason why we started this, is that whatever you're earning today, you could be earning 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much. Whatever you're achieving today, you could be achieving vastly more. And you could never use all of your potential. There are average people, when you look at people, and I work with them, I work with people who are millionaires and multimillionaires and centimillionaires, 100 millionaires and billionaires. And almost every one of them started with nothing, started unsure about themselves, started doubting themselves, started off with limited background, started off with no money, and achieved extraordinary things in their life because they realized that they could use more and more of their potential. Now here's our discovery. The more of your potential you use, the more becomes available to you. The more you use, the more becomes available to you. It's almost like as you're coming out of a valley, as you come up higher and higher in the valley expands and expands, and what you can do expands as well. The third is that you have the ability to be, do, and have more than ever before. So whatever you've accomplished in your life today, this was Maslow's great breakthrough, is it's only a shadow of what is truly possible for you in the months and years ahead. And if you've accomplished great things, people say, well, I'm doing pretty well. I said, well, if you're doing pretty well without these ideas, just think what you could be doing with them. I mean, if you're doing really well already, think what you could be doing if you could unleash more of that potential. Once upon a time, I had a gentleman come to my seminar, and he looked very nice. He was very well turned out, very well dressed, a very confident, positive, happy person. And as he went through the seminar, he got vast amounts out of the seminar. But I said, so where do you come from? What are you doing? And he told me a story, which I thought was quite remarkable. I never forgot it. He said, well, his grandfather came out, this was in Western Canada, it was in Alberta, came out to Alberta at the turn of the century and homesteaded. At that time, that you could get 160 acres and you could homestead, and if you worked the land for 5 years, then you owned the farm. Well, it was what we call scrub land. It wasn't very good land. And he said his grandfather eked out a living, basically raising a certain amount of grain, certain amount of grass, raising cattle, and so on. And then he passed the farm on to his son, who turned out to be this man's father. And his father struggled with the land for years through the wars and into the 50s and 60s. And he died, and he passed the land on to his son. So it was scrub land, and he could never make it work. So the only thing he could do was raise goats. And he was raising goats, and he was on welfare. And he was living in the same crummy old house that his grandfather had built and trying to raise 2 or 3 kids, and they never had any money, and they lived off goats and goat milk and welfare checks. And one day, an oil company came along and said, you know, we're doing some seismological tests in this area. Could we do some tests on your land to see if there's any oil down there? And he said, sure, do whatever you want. And because he said, I've got nothing going. So they put down a test well, and they found a pool of oil. And they immediately signed a royalty agreement. It's a standard royalty agreement that gave him, I think, $10 a barrel as a royalty. They began to pump 8,000 gallons or 8,000 barrels, whatever it was, 8,000 barrels a day, $10 a barrel, 8,000 barrels a day out of his land, and they reckon it would go on for at least 20, 25 years. He went from basically being a goat farmer on welfare to getting an income of, how much is that, $10 times 8,000? Yeah, about $80,000. I think it was $80,000 a month, I guess what it was. Please bear with me. It's an enormous amount of money. Now he's driving a Rolls Royce. He's living in a beautiful home in Calgary. He's got his kids in private schools. He flies around on private jets. He's making more than $1 million a year. He said, but the interesting thing about that is that the oil was always there. The oil was always there. The oil was there when my grandfather settled the land. The oil was there when my father had the land. The oil was there all my life. And he was probably in his mid-30s at this time. But I couldn't do anything with it till somebody came along and found it and showed me how to get it out of the ground. And it's the same with you or I. You and I have this great, enormous potential that has been there all this time. And I say you don't have to be somebody different than who you are. You just have to be everything that you are. You just have to get the potential out. And I am your oil company. I've come along and I've done the seismological tests, and I'm going to put down the test well, and I'm going to show you how to start getting enormous quantities out of that great reservoir that lies within you. Here's another truth about you. You can learn anything you need to learn to achieve any goal you can set for yourself. Now, my friend Les Brown says, to achieve something you've never achieved before, you must become someone you've never been before. And I say you have to learn something you've never learned before. But the wonderful thing is, the more you learn, the more you can learn, is that every person has enormous untapped reserves of intelligence. So you can learn any subject. You could learn how to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, an architect, an engineer. You could learn how to do anything. The only thing that stands between us and great success is simply learning how to do things better and different. And the more you learn, the smarter you get. The smarter you get, the more you can learn. And we'll talk about this and how to do it. But the fact is that there's no obstacles standing between you and any goal that you can set for yourself. You just have to learn how to do it. And every single person who is successful today was once a failure. Everyone who's in the top 10% started where? In the bottom 10%. And then they set very clear goals, and they learned specific things, and they did things differently from the average person, and their life took off like that Mercedes-Benz touching on the gas pedal, blam, their lives changed. So sometimes the absence of one subject, one piece of knowledge, can hold you back for years. And I say never allow yourself to be held back because of the absence of a piece of knowledge or a skill, because all business skills are learnable. All money-making skills are learnable. All success skills are learnable. Everybody who knows them now at one time did not know them at all. And so you can learn anything you need to learn. Here's another one. Your life only gets better when you get better. It's amazing how many people want their lives to get better, but they don't want to change. They don't want to improve themselves. They want things on the outside to get better, but there's a direct one-to-one relationship, which you'll learn about in the next few minutes, between what's going on the inside and what's going on the outside. The rule is, and it is literally a spiritual law, is you cannot have anything more or different on the outside than you are on the inside. But the wonderful thing is that there's only one thing in the world that you can control, which is what? What's going on inside of you. And by controlling that, you can control your entire world, which you'll learn in a few minutes. Now, another truth is it doesn't matter where you're coming from, all that matters is where you're going. One of the most important things in life that I've learned is most people are held back because of regrets. And Barbara and I came across this article a few years ago, and it said, analyzing a psychiatrist, it was an interview with a psychiatrist who had worked with unhappy people for 25 years, very prominent social psychiatrist, worked with top people. He said the most common words he ever heard when someone came to him for counseling, which would take anywhere from 6 months to 6 years, he said, were the words, if only. If only my father, if only my mother, if only I had, if only I hadn't, if only they, if only this, if only that. He said the words if only preceded an entire lifetime of grief. So what we did is we made a decision, and we passed it on to you, is no more if onlys. No more if onlys in life. Never say the word again. As far as we're concerned, the past buried the past is gone. There's no more if onlys in your life. And when you leave all of your if onlys, all of your regrets from the past, suddenly your whole life starts to open up. So from now on, just remember, all that matters is where you're going. You cannot change the past. One of the great rules in life is never be upset about something you can't change, and you can't change a past event. So what we do is just let the past events go. Probably 90%, 95% of all unhappiness is caused by past events, which can't be changed anyway. Once you let your past events go. I had this discussion with a very smart woman. She was interpreting for me in Kiev, in the Ukraine. And she said, you mean you can just forget about things that happened in the past? Just let them go? I said, yes. She said she had never heard that before. She thought if you had had a bad past experience, you had to carry it with you. Sort of like a wounded animal. You had to carry it with you and pet it and stroke it and keep it alive and talk about it and share it with your friends and think about it at night and so on. She said she never knew it. You just get rid of it. Just chuck it. And so she came back the next day and she was just beaming. She was so happy. She could not believe that it was possible to just let go of past events. One of the most important discoveries in all of human success. Well, the seventh is the only limit on what you can accomplish is the limit you place on yourself by your own thinking. This was such a breakthrough to me. I still, every time I look at that, I think, geez, that's interesting. Wow, the only limit on what you can accomplish is the limit you place on yourself by your own thinking. So if you change your thinking, everything changes for you. One of the exercises that we do, and it's not even in this program, but I'll just pass it on to you, is we say take your current income or your best year's income and add a zero to it as your goal. Your goal is your very best income in your life and put a zero on the end. Now the first time you think of that, your mind does a reject. It's like a reject, sort of like a body rejects a new organ. Well, your mind rejects it. It just kicks it out. And you say, well, I'll put it back in. It kicks it out. It just kicks it out. And it keeps kicking. It's impossible to go from what I've taken my whole life to earn what I'm earning today, and you're saying I should start thinking about earning 10 times as much. I say, so do this exercise. Just imagine that there's 1 in 1,000 probability or possibility that you could achieve an income goal of 10 times. Just 1 in 1,000. Is that true? Is that possible? Say yes. Yeah, there's at least one chance in 1,000 that's possible. Well, could there possibly be 2 chances? Yes. Maybe 3 chances. What could you do to increase the probabilities? And once you start to think like that, your thinking begins to change from, no, it's not possible for me, to I wonder how it would be possible. What would I have to do to earn that kind of money? And now your whole creative mind opens up, and you start to think and see possibilities that you never saw before. So let's say you don't make it to 10 times. Let's say you only make it to 8 times, or 5 times. What a tragedy. But the thing is, the starting point is to start changing your thinking about what's possible. Why are poor people poor? Because they think poorly. My friend Charlie Jones has a beautiful home. He's a very successful speaker and lives in Santa Barbara. And he grew up on a farm in Oklahoma, and his father drove out from the farm in a sort of an RV, drove out and visited him for a couple of weeks in Santa Monica, and then he was heading back. And he saw his father pounding away on something under the car, and he said, what's wrong? He said, well, my brakes are gone. My brakes are out, so I'm sort of pounding off the brake, the pipe which has the brake fluid in it, and I'll just be able to sort of pump it and until I get back to Oklahoma, and then I can get somebody to fix it for me inexpensively. He said, Dad, he said, that's crazy. You can't drive all the way back to Oklahoma with no brakes. He's going to use the emergency brake and everything else. He said, oh, let's get it fixed. He said, well, it costs a lot of money in a place like Santa Barbara. I said, but what are you talking about? I said, what if the brakes failed on a grade or on a winding road or something like that? He said, you could die. He said, why is it you're so cheap? He said, Charlie, he said, poor folks have poor ways, and it's really hard to get over them. Poor folks have poor ways. Always remember that. Poor folks have poor ways. They think poor. They think cheap. They think saving. They think spending as little as possible. They think how little money they have. But you find that successful people have successful thinking. They think very, very differently than poor people. And so remember that. Poor folks have poor ways, but rich folks have rich ways. It's because people who make a lot of money, my friend Jim Rohn said, he said, the most important part of becoming a millionaire is not the money, but it's the person you have to become a millionaire. You have to become a totally different person to go from zero to being worth more than $1 million. But the good news is that if you lost all of your money because of a crash in the economy or something else, you can make it all back again because now you're the kind of person who can make it. Once you become a millionaire in your thinking, then it's only a matter of time before you quickly restore that amount of money in your reality. So the starting point is to change our thinking, which we have said over and over again. Moving right along, things to think about. I came across these last week. I thought you'd be interested. This is Dr. Seuss. Today you are you. This is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. Isn't that cute? I thought that was great. Well, you don't like that? All right, the heck with you. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Isn't that a great one? So it's really important that you realize that you have everything that you need within you right now to achieve everything you could possibly dream of in life. So let's talk about session 1, the psychology of achievement. We say each person has a success instinct. Now what does that mean? Is that every person has an innate drive toward the realization of their full potential. This is installed in you. You see children, they want to touch and taste and smell and feel and get into things. Adults are always wanting to improve themselves. Everybody is ambitious to a greater or lesser degree. The only thing that restricts what you do, have, is your own thinking. What you think is not possible for you, you wish you could, you wish you would, and so on. But everybody has this drive toward success. There was a wonderful line that said, within each person is an inherent drive to the full realization of their potential. In fact, my friend, my mentor, Ernest Holmes, said that all negative emotions come from frustrated potential. At the root, your negative emotions, your negativity comes from feeling that you could do or be far more than you are. It's only something that is holding you back. And then we make the mistake of thinking that the something is ourselves, and as soon as you think of that, you move from